Headphones. Just put on some headphones. No, put on like regular headphones.
This computer doesn't have.
These headphones right here. Take Maria's.
There's no. There's no spot to plug them in. Remember?
What are you talking about? They're not USB headphones. They're regular headphones, Sad.
I know. This can only use USB headphones.
No, it can't. It uses regular headphones.
Really?
Yeah.
There's no audio. Yeah, these don't work.
Assalamualaikum, Nazim. Can you hear me? I think you're muted.
Assalamu alaikum, Shaykh. How are you?
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. How you doing, akhi?
Good, good. Alhamdulillah. How about you?
I'm all right, man.
I'm good. Are you home?
Yeah, unfortunately, my wife has COVID, so
Oh,
I can't go to work.
oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. How is she?
Alhamdulillah, she's doing okay. I think she's gone through the worst of it, but after that, everything is she's recovering. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Didn't you say she has already been sick? No, is it second time?
Yeah, I don't know what's going on.
Oh.
I don't know what the doctors are saying. But,
Mhm.
okay.
I see. Is she with the? Are you in New Jersey or?
No, I'm in DC.
Okay, good, good. I see. I see. So, how?
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. So today inshallah is just an introductory class just to get an idea of what fiqh is, what it is as a science, what it entails, and some of the issues regarding it, some of the things that we're going to cover, how it's divided, etc. And I think it's a really important science amongst the Islamic sciences. It's something that you'll find that a lot of us do spend our time and we focus quite a bit of our time on. And the reason for that is because it is something that involves our day-to-day activities. So it's not something strange that we would all be at least not be familiar with. So linguistically, it means to understand. And basically, you'll find in a number of hadith and a number of ayat whenever it talks about fiqh, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَيُفَقِّهُ فِي الدِّينِ, and then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, مَنْ يُرِدِ اللَّهُ بِهِ خَيْرًا يُفَقِّهُ فِي الدِّينِ. And then and all of those are in the linguistic meaning. So it's basically it's meant to mean to understand. But Islamically, as time progressed and as we moved on, it basically is the knowledge concerning Islamic legal rulings that are extracted from certified sources, and those certified sources are the Quran and the Sunnah. So even in the Quran and Sunnah, you'll find that it's not just a superficial fiqh or a superficial understanding. There's actually a depth that is meant there and that is understood there. And what is the purpose of fiqh? Why would you study fiqh, and how does all of these things, knowing what is halal and knowing what is haram, how does that bring us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Because it allows us to understand what worship actually is, and in really submitting, when we talk about being Muslim and Islam, it's a submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's an understanding that anything that pleases Allah actually is worship. Fiqh has a number of different derivatives, so there are a number of things that fiqh is based off of. So when we talked about the certified sources in the beginning, the first three are agreed upon by all Muslims, right? So all the Muslims agree on this, that is Quran, Sunnah, and Ijma'. Ijma' it's commonly translated as the scholarly consensus. And then the fourth one, which is where the Lahiri madhab or the literalist madhab, they disagree in, and this is qiyas or analogy. Saying that there is, you have overt analogy and you have a, like, I guess a distanced analogy, qiyasun khafi, and it's the qiyasun jali, or which is the apparent or overt analogy. Not even the Lahiris, they don't even disagree with that, right? That's something that even they accept. It's the qiyasun khafi that they actually have more of an issue with and more of a problem with. And these aren't the four, only four, but these are the four that all of the madahib agree upon, again, minus the Lahiriya. There are other proofs, right? There are other certified sources. From them are masalih and mafasid, the potential harms and benefits, the actions of the people in Medina, istihsan, istihsab. And we'll talk a little bit more about this, inshallah, when we actually start getting a little bit into the Umdah and we talk about the introduction to the Umdah, inshallah. And why did it emerge as a science? Why was it that fiqh, so you have fiqh, hadith, tafsir, etc. Why is it that fiqh actually came into a science in and of itself? What is it what was the purpose of it? Or why even have a system coming up to talk about that? And I think it's really important because it just to make it easy for the people and to simplify it for the people, like, okay, hey, these are the things that you can do and these are the things that you cannot do. And in line with that, we have the hadith of Nu'man ibn Bashir, where the Prophet ﷺ said, "Inna al-halal bayyin, wa inna al-haram bayyin, wa baynahuma umur mutashabihat, مشتبهات لا يعلمهن كثير من الناس فمن اتقى الشبهات استبرأ لدينه وعرضه ومن وقع في الشبهات وقع في الحرام." That the permitted is clear and the forbidden is clear. What falls between them are doubtful issues, that which most do not know. Whosoever avoids these doubtful issues has saved his religion and honor, and whosoever willingly falls into them will fall into the forbidden. So I just want to actually stop and talk about this hadith because I think it's something that's really important, just to get a grasp on and just to get an idea on what it is what is being spoken about here. Because a lot of people, they will kind of use this hadith as a conservative means and say, okay, if there's something that's doubtful, then I need to stay away from it. So what are some, why is that? Why can that be misapplied, or why do you feel that can be misapplied? Or that is that the right way?
So I've heard this hadith before, and I've always had questions about it. So first, my clarification: doubtful issues are those that we could call them makruh, meaning we don't know for sure if that's haram, and you cannot call it haram yet, and you feel it's not really halal. Can you call it makruh? Are those issues doubtful?
No. So a makruh is something that has a hukam, right? It already has a ruling on it, and that is makruh, and that is something that is disliked, versus something being mushtabih, something being doubtful. So over here, basically, when we talk about things that are doubtful, it's very important for us to understand that this doubt is actually subjective, meaning that just because something is doubtful to you, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's doubtful to me. And I'm sorry, Nazim, can you just please do me a favor and keep an eye on the participants? And if there's anybody in the waiting room, just go ahead and let them in.
How do I do that?
Okay.
I mean, there I see Zakir Chaudhary is attending.
Okay, Zakir is here. All right, fine. Just keep an eye on it, inshallah. If you could just check it every once in a while, because it's I don't want to break my chain of thought.
Oh.
But over here, it's very important because the Prophet ﷺ, he said that the haram is clear and the halal is clear, right? He said that these two things are clear, and there are doubtful issues. And look what he says here. He says that لا يعلمهن كثير من الناس, that which most do not know. That there are a lot of people who don't know this, right? There are a number of people that don't know this. Meaning what? If there are a lot of people that don't know it, it means that there are some people that do. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if you have many people who don't know this and you have a few people that do know it, that means that this idea of things being doubtful is always going to be subjective, meaning that just because something is doubtful to me, it's not necessary that that same thing is doubtful to you. And we can both look at the same thing, right? We can both look at the same thing, and we might even come to a different conclusion concerning the ruling on that issue. So and just because something is clear to me, right, and something might be clear to you in the complete opposite direction, and that's completely fine, right? Islamically, this is something that is completely reasonable. The only thing that is agreed upon is that if I see something that is doubtful to me, right, if I know for sure that this thing is doubtful for me, then I should stay away from it. But if I see somebody else doing it, am I allowed to tell that person to stay away from it?
No, that may be clear for to him.
Ah, because it might be clear to him. Ahsant. Very good. All right. And you know, I mean, like, so, like I said, this hadith is it's really nice in that sense, is that it really gives us perspective. But I also feel that it is misused and misapplied, and I think there's a lot of abuse around this hadith in for the people who have that conservative mindset. You know, who really feel like, okay, no, if it's doubtful, then you have to stay away from it. But the reality is, okay, yeah, it's doubtful to you. It's not necessary that it's doubtful to the other person. And like I said, if you guys have any questions, you know, please feel free to stop me. And inshallah, you know, it's an open discussion. It's not. I'm not big on just dictating, and I want to hear what you guys have to say.
So should we take this hadith as a more abstract way or more specific way? So meaning, who is that someone who avoids these doubtful issues? Meaning, what are those doubtful issues and who avoid them and who falls into them?
Okay, so who is the Prophet ﷺ talking to here?
Well, Muslims for sure.
Right, he's talking to the companions, right? So he's not just talking to anyone, and he's telling them, right? He's telling them, like, if something is doubtful to you, meaning that if something is doubtful to you as an individual, right? Because he's saying that, okay, there are a lot of things that most people won't know, meaning that most of us won't know. And because most of us won't know, it's probably safer, and it is safer that what should I do?
Abstain.
I should abstain from it. I should stay away from it. And that's something that's really important.
And until I go and talk to a scholar and clarify and remove my doubt, then I can act upon it, whatever the ruling is.
I'm saying, which is a really good question. What if I go to a scholar and it's still not clear to me?
Well, still feel if this feeling is, if the doubt is still significant, to abstain, better to abstain.
You still abstain, and not like, you know what I mean, like going to a scholar, it might bring some clarity to the situation in terms of the ruling. But at the end of the day, this is why we find that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he always says, or you know, he would close things by saying istafti qalbak. You know, just because I have a scholar or I have an imam or I have a person of knowledge giving me a fatwa in something, will my heart always be at ease following what that scholar or that person has told me or said to me?
It's let me bring you an example. So when Sheikh Hatem was asked about a particular ruling here in America and a particular ruling in Europe over the same thing, and he said, "Are we Americans allowed to take European fatwa and apply it here in America?" And he said, well, if the person is really doubtful about that and he just finds this fatwa as an excuse, then no, she should abstain from that. Meaning, even if there is fatwa out there, but his doubt is still.
I mean, forget being in another country. Sometimes you can be in the same state, you can be in the same city, right? But because of family situations, because of job situations, right? There are thousands of scenarios that can come into play. And the thing is, when it comes to fatwa is always individual, right? I think the mistake that many of us make is that we try to find, you know, a lot of matching variables in the fatwa and be like, okay, now that this person received this fatwa also applies to me, right? Or it applies to you, or it applies to him. When the reality is, a fatwa is always individualized, right? It's always based on that person's, you know, circumstance. And there are many times there we miss context when it comes to those issues, when we come, you know, when it comes to a lot of these things. And sometimes it's very clear, right? You know, the thing is, like, you know, if someone in England says, hey, I can't find water, can I make tayammum? You know, does that apply? Yeah, that's a pretty universal application, right? That's not a Europe specific fatwa, but it might be a situation where, like, okay, a sister is like, I'm trying to get out of this marriage, but no imam is letting me, you know, no imam is allowing me to be released from this husband, even though he's abusive. What do I do? Right. And that point, you're going to have something that is very unique and very specialized to that sister in that particular situation, because there are a lot of state laws that kind of need to be navigated. Is that fair? Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. Before we move on, so I don't. I think I'm not an admin to convert attendees into panelists, so you can see them and they may talk to you.
Okay.
Am I? Can I do that? How? Or you want me to give that right to so I don't interrupt you? I could do it myself.
Okay. I'm not. Is what can I if I make you a host, maybe that can do it.
Perhaps I don't know.
Oh no, or you know what? I'll probably have to make you a co-host because I have to keep presenting.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Something. Yeah. Some. Yeah. I see. I see new buttons. How did you? Okay. More. Yeah. Yeah. Promote the panels. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I got it. Figured
Right.
out.
So the question now would come in, okay, why are there madhabs? If the Quran and the Sunnah and Ijma and Qiyas, you have all of these tools in place, why is it that you need separate schools of thought to actually apply to those different tools? Right? So we have this text. We have the text in front of us. How come you have multiple understandings of the text? Why can't we just have one madhab? Or we have some of our brothers and sisters who's like, okay, no, we just need to return back to the Quran and Sunnah, and this is what is going to bring us guidance, and this is what's going to bring us back to the correct way. Having these madahib, this is actually one of the ways that we have gone astray, and this is one of the reasons that we differ. So like I said, you have this divine revelation, right? You have divine revelation, you have the Quran and the Sunnah, and you have the Islamic ruling. What happens? Why is there this dissidence or this break between the revelation and between the ruling itself? And the reality is that you have a human intellect in the middle, right? So it's you have to understand fiqh is a very human endeavor, right? It's a very human endeavor, and it's basically a human trying to process the divine. And whenever you have something that has a shortcoming trying to process something that is perfect, you're always going to have shortcomings in that. So why are there madahib? Because as long as you have people involved in this, and as long as there's a human element involved in these things, it's not strange, right? It's not something that is so odd and totally off that you would have these different understandings to that, because humans have something called perspective, right? And each of us will look at things differently, and it's not necessarily that those things are wrong, and it's not necessarily that those things are right. It just really depends on a number of different things in a number of different contexts. But just to kind of put things in perspective for us on why is it that you have these differences of opinion, why is it that we have these madahib, it's important. This is the reason is because there are human endeavors in trying to deal with divine scripture. is, does this make sense?
Yeah. I always tell my friend, look, it's fine. Companions, Sahaba had different opinions. And
Yeah, absolutely. And you didn't have the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, telling them like, no, we have to be monolithic. There's only one answer to everything. There, you don't have multiple answers to this. I think Islam is unique in the sense that it allows multiple right answers, right? It's not just one right answer for everything. And you have a number of hadith that talk about that. So like, for example, when they would be traveling during Ramadan, the companions, they said the ones who were fasting, they didn't say anything to the ones who weren't. And the ones who weren't fasting would not say anything to the ones that were. And that just really shows the tolerance and the allowance of these multiple differences of opinion, and how they kind of dealt with each other and dealt with these differences and these different understandings. None of them said like, okay, we all should break fast because we're traveling, and none of them said, okay, well, the travel isn't that difficult, so all of us should fast. What I mean? And it's just having that tolerance is something that's really important. And if you want to ask what is missing, between us, it's that is what is actually missing. Having a difference of opinion is fine. I think that's very normal. I think that's very healthy. If you have 5 people in a room, you're going to have 100 different opinions, right? Between all of those people. It's not that we all have to agree on something. No, we just have to learn how to deal with each other and how we deal with those differences.
So there is hadith. So I wanted to ask your opinion. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam reportedly said, "Difference of opinion is a mercy to people, to Muslims." Um, is
Yeah,
that is that sahih?
no, it's not
Uh,
it's not sahih in the sense that you can attribute it to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but it is right. You know, the meaning is right, that you know, having all of these differences of opinion have actually allowed Islam to expand the way that it has. Right? Had it been very monolithic and it had it just been like one opinion for everything, you wouldn't have the variety, you wouldn't have the culture, you wouldn't have, you know, Islam spreading the way it did. Islam is the most diverse religion in the world today, and the reason for that is it because it allows for those differences, and just every culture kind of expressed Islam in their own way that kind of fit in with their culture. And I think that's something that's very praiseworthy of the religion, and it just shows the longevity of Islam and how it is able to continue and able to maintain. So now that we have an idea of what a madhab is, I think it's also very important to understand what an imam is. Like, you know, so what we hear the term imam quite a bit, and we know the four famous imams. So in general, an imam is someone whose correct rulings are more than his mistaken ones. And the imama of an individual is usually agreed upon by, you know, by consensus. So if we talk about the four imams or the four madahib, a lot of people will say, okay, well, why is it that you chose or we chose these four madahib? Well, it's not that I chose them as an individual, right? This is something that the ummah chose as a whole, and this is something that we all agreed on. I remember I was giving a class one time, and a brother said, "Okay, well, why can't we just go back to the Quran and the Sunnah?" I said, "Okay, that's fine. You know, I like the romantic idea of returning back to the scripture, but I said, okay, but we have to digest that scripture, right? We have to understand it." And I was like, "Do you agree with me that it has to be understood and brought, you know, as a ruling?" He said, "Yeah." So I said, "Okay, well, I have a choice. I can either take your understanding, or I can go back to the understanding of one of the imams or one of the madahib. And the advantage of going back to the madahib is that as a structure, as a whole, the entire ummah has agreed on that." I said, "As for your imama, we haven't gotten to a point where we can actually judge where the ummah has come together and said that your understanding is that of the level of the madhab or the level of the imam." And the reality is, you know, with this independent thought, which I don't have an issue with, like, you know, doing independent research and you know, coming up with independent conclusions, that's great. But over 90% of the time, you are just going to replicate what has preceded you. You're not going to come up with any new type of ruling, right? So the thing is, if you're just going to reinvent the wheel, you know, why not take something that has been prepackaged, something that has been researched? You know, I mean, like you're talking about a number of scholars have worked within those particular fields, have worked within those particular, you know, dynamics and those schools of thought. It doesn't really make sense to go outside of them. Even though, like I said, I personally don't have issue with somebody who says, no, you know, I want to do my independent reasoning. Go for it. You know what I mean? Like, knock yourself out. So the madhab comes from the imam, right? So in the madhab, it was the idea behind the madhab was just a way to kind of develop consistency in rulings, right? Because the problem is if you just you keep focusing on the text and you keep focusing on issues, then you'll just have like an unlimited number of issues that come out of that. So when you start applying a methodology and actually dealing with the text, you start limiting the number of rulings. So even with different rulings, like for example the saliva of a dog, you might have like two or three different rulings concerning that, but you don't have seven, right? You don't have 12, you don't have 50. And I think kind of bringing those numbers down is something that is really important because it makes a lot of those issues more digestible. And the only difference between these madahib is the methodology of approach and how they deal with the Quran and the Sunnah. That's it. That's the only difference by you know, that it's set up by them. And even though a lot of these madahib, they started with an individual, right? They started with an imam. We have to understand that it changed over time, right? It changed over time because there are a number of scholars now who started working within that paradigm, who started working within that methodology, and sometimes they would even go over against the ruling of their imam, right? And that's something, again, that's really important to understand, that every madhab is not representative of everything that that imam states, right? It's a representation of what they believe his methodology should be, meaning that you have a group of scholars that come after and they said, okay, hey, had the imam had this information and according to his methodology, this is the way that it would actually come forward, and this is the ruling he would have actually come toward, even though it might be something that he did not rule in. So does it develop this consistency that we're talking about? Like every madhab, because they have a methodology, they have one answer. No, that doesn't happen either. But again, the idea is that it does limit that. It does limit those opinions, and I think that's something again really important to stress and something really important to understand that even within a particular madhab, particular madhab, you will find multiple opinions. It's not each madhab does not represent this monolithic type idea, right? Because you have to understand that every madhab is made up of individuals, right? And just because they ascribe to a particular madhab, it just means like, okay, hey, in general, we agree that this framework is the one that is correct. And this is the way that the Quran and Sunnah should be approached. But when it comes to application of that framework, you're going to have differences of opinion. And again, this is something that is really, it is natural. And the more opinions you have, these opinions they started becoming recorded. With the students of Abu Hanifa, they started recording things, and of Malik and Shafi and Ahmad ibn Hanbal and Layth. You had a number of different scholars whose opinions were reported, and those opinions were recorded then, and they were codified into these different books. And then what happened is that after a few generations, that you had a whole bunch of madahib, and those madahib started dying out, right? They started dying out to the point that only these four, arguably five madahib, like really stayed. They're the ones that really persisted, and they're the ones that really stayed on. So those codified books, what happened was like, until today, until that point today, we have now what are considered, books that are representative of the madhab. Are there fiqh books that are still written? Yes, there are. And those books will continue to be written. People feel like they need to continue adding to the Islamic encyclopedia, which is fine. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. But historically, there are certain books that have come to a point that the scholars of a particular school have said, okay, hey, these are a good representation of what the madhab has to offer in terms of rulings. And these books are called, they're considered primary sources. So the Hanafi madhab, and there's a number of books here. You have Kunz al-Diqaiq, Al-Hidayah, Hashit ibn Abdin, Al-Lubab, Al-Bahr al-Ra'iq, Al-Mabsut. All of these are representative of the madhab, that within the madhab itself, they'll say, hey, you want to find our rulings? These are the books you want to go back to. Maliki madhab, same thing. They have a whole bunch of books that are again representative. Bidayat al-Mujtahid, Hidayat al-Dawsaqi, Al-Furuq, Al-Mudawwana, Mawahib al-Jalil, Qawaneen al-Ahkam, Al-Risala ibn Abi Zayd. All of these again representative of the Maliki madhab, and the rulings will be found within the madhab. And again, this is not an exhaustive list, right? These are just some books that are representative of it. The unique thing about the Shafi'i madhab is that Imam Shafi actually had books written that he wrote himself, and they have been preserved up until this day. And this is something you don't find with the other madhab. The closest one will probably be Imam Ahmad, because his musnad has been preserved. But that, again, that's a book of hadith and not his fiqh rulings. So Imam Shafi has two very famous books, which is his collection of rulings, and then you have his Risala, which is more a book of legal thoughts, or Usul al-Fiqh. إعانة الطالبين طالبين I'm sorry روض الطالب نهاية المحتاج الوجيز الإقناع مغني المحتاج. All of these again representative of the Shafi'i fiqh. The Hanbali fiqh, المغني كشاف القناع الشرح الكبير الكافي الإنصاف المقنع روض المربع, which is much later. But all of these again representative of the Hanbali madhab. So the question is, okay, we got all these books, we have these madahib. How do we approach fiqh? How should I, as a regular Muslim, lay Muslim, come in, and how should I deal with fiqh as a science? So usually what is done is you study a primer. So a primer is basically an introductory book into a particular madhab. And these are the ones that are very famous amongst the different madhab. These aren't the only primers, but like I said, these are the ones that are generally the most famous, the ones that are most studied. So the Hanafi Fiqh Mukhtasar al-Quduri, you find a lot of Dars Nizami, Dar al-Ulum, this is the book that is taught. Maliki Fiqh al-Murshid, على المعين على الضروري. Again, this is something that is taught in many of the Maliki Madarish. In the Shafi'i fiqh, Matan Abi Shuja', very famous Shafi'i fiqh that is taught, Shafi'i primer that is taught, and then Hanbali fiqh, Umdah al-Fiqh. And this is the book, inshallah, that we'll be studying and that we'll be spending time with. So why do we start with these primers? And I think one of the main reasons and one of the best is to get an understanding of the structure and chapters of fiqh. Understanding what fiqh is. What is it? What am I going to talk about in these books? What is it that these books actually discuss? Because when I get an idea of what some of the topics are, what happens is that once I get a grasp of that, I'm not I can go to any book now, right? Because I have this foundation and I know how fiqh is organized, I can go to any fiqh book and I'll have a general idea of how that book is organized and where I can look up masail and where I can look up particular issues. It also helps the student develop his or her madhab. And I think, again, this is something that is very important. Once a student has a structure, and this is the same thing in elementary school, right? When we go to school, they actually help us build our madhab in science, help build our madhab in math, help build our madhab in English. And we have to understand that what they're teaching us is actually one school of thought. There are a number of schools of thoughts in any science, right? The only thing is that we are more aware of it within the Islamic sciences than we are in the worldly sciences. Even though in the worldly sciences, you do have schools of thought and how to approach particular things and how to understand particular things. The other nice thing is that it gathers all of the major rulings into one text. So you don't have to worry about verses, ayat, you don't have to worry about a hadith. It's basically just a guide to your day-to-day life. Like, hey, read this book and you'll be good on following your day-to-day life, inshallah. So that is the reason for those primers. But what mentality should I have when I go into fiqh? And I think the best one is to have a relatively blind one. If I come in with my biases and I come in with my understandings, then what happens is that I'm going to continuously challenge everything that I'm taught. And again, I have no issue with challenging what is being presented, but the problem is if I don't even have the basic tools, I need to learn how to even challenge. So the first step of learning anything is just intake, right? I intake and then I build my house, I build my madhab. And then as time goes on, once my madhab is fortified, once I have this house, then what I can do is I can change this brick out, I can put this chair in, right? What I mean? I can start making adjustments as necessary. I don't need to be fixated. So you do have two different ways of even dealing with that. So a lot of people will be like, okay, once you get to a madhab, you just got to stick to it, and whatever the madhab says, that's what you got to follow. I'm not really with that. And the reason that I'm not is that it develops a type of like a superiority complex. Because when you kind of stick to your madhab, you become very dismissive of the other madhab, and you just kind of develop the sense like, okay, no, this is the one that's right, therefore everyone else is wrong. But the way that I kind of want to approach al-Umdah, and this is one of the reasons that I took Sheikh Hatem al-Hajj's classes as a basis, is because he actually does a comparative fiqh type thing. It's a Hanbali base, but he has no problem kind of discussing some of the other issues from some of the other madhab. And the reason for that is I want my students to develop that appreciation, and I think it's really important that we learn how to appreciate the different madhab. And I think again that's something that's really important. And questioning is something that is fundamental. There's no doubt about it. But there have to be certain things that we blindly follow, at least initially, and then afterward we're more than welcome to question, because that's at that point we can start substituting things out. So blind following is another issue that a lot of people have a problem with, like doing taqleed, it's such a bad thing. It's something that's natural. Like I don't know anybody who walks into a building knowing everything or just doing ijtihad from day one. If I don't have any tools, how is it that I'm going to reach this point where I can where I develop this personal understanding? Even understanding what those tools are, there has to be a level of blind following. I need those tools in order to actually build something, in order to actually do something. So once an individual has a foundation, you can do whatever you want, right? I have no issue with that, but at least in the first initial stages, it's very important to build up that foundation. And once that foundation is built, again, like I said, you want to take a brick out, you want to put a chair in, you want to move a table, you want to change out the window. I have no issue with that. I have no problem with that. And like I said, that rigidity is something that is really dangerous, because it leads to arrogance, and it leads us to looking down on others, or it leads us to kind of forcing our opinion on others. So in general, how is fiqh arranged? And this is something that is pretty universal, right? This is not something that's specific to any madhab in particular. All the madhab are arranged out by this. So in general, you have ibadat, you have muamalat, and you have jinayat. So individual worship, again, my individual relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Muamalat is, society, kind of how they deal with each other. So, I think a good example of this is, marriages and business transactions. Do I need the state to certify every business transaction in order for that business transaction to be sound? Or do I need the state to certify my marriage in order for my marriage to be sound? No, right? This is all civil, right? These are all things, these are all transactions that people do without the need of a state. And then you have state issues, which is jinayat, and this is, more corporal and capital punishment. When it comes to witnessing, how is it that the state determines if a witness is, reasonable or not? And then amongst all of this, you have etiquettes, right? So etiquettes it's not something that I mentioned here, but Islamic etiquettes, how to use the bathroom, example, for example, or what to do when somebody sneezes. I think that's something also that it might fall under social issues, but it's also something that's very personal. Like how I use the bathroom. It's not right. It's not a social event. It's a very personal event. And it's not a ritual event, right? It's not salah, zakat, sawm, hajj, or any of those things. So I think etiquettes would be something that would fit into this as well. But in general, these are the three major wings or the major chapters of fiqh. So, like we said, if we discuss how this is organized, right, it has to do with individuals, the dealing with the people, and dealing with the state, because the state has the power to enforce, right? When we're dealing with equals, there's no enforcement there, right? When I'm going to marry or I'm going to for a business transaction or business dealing, so in this way, you manage to cover all of society and you cover all of the issues that are involved in that. So you have different people who are at different levels when they do study fiqh. And the beginner level, like I said, is just to get a base understanding, right? To kind of develop that foundation, help them get to their day-to-day lives, just so they start recognizing some of the issues and some of the problems that they have, making sure that they're praying properly, making sure that when they get married, that they're fulfilling all the conditions, and some people might be like, okay, well, what's the point of studying state issues? Why would you study corporal or capital punishment? I think at least having that awareness, okay, if I hit this person, or if I did this to this person, if I was in an Islamic country, then this is what the punishment would be upon me. Kind of just to keep ourselves in check. And I think that's something that's really important. The intermediate student, basically what he's going to do, he's going to look into the reasons of why those rulings were founded, right? So the stage one is the ruling. Stage two is like, okay, well, why is that ruling in that way, right? And we're talking about within the madhab. And then advanced, you'll have two levels of advanced, like the difference of opinion within the madhab itself, right? Why did those differences arise? And then someone who would be even more advanced in that, now he starts looking into a comparative level. But the reality is, comparing outside of the madhab, I don't think you need to master one madhab. And I think Sheikh Hatem Haji actually mentions this, and I agree with him 100%. You don't need to reach a point where you master one madhab in order to look at other madhab. Right? I don't think that's necessary. I don't think that's a necessary step. I think it's good, again, to build a base in one, but consciously kind of being aware as you're going along and as you're building this process of what some of the madhab have to say. So this is basically what I wanted to mention, some of the things that I do want to talk about. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us tawfiq, to make it a blessed beginning. And I hope it's something that's really beneficial. I know the way that I want to do this class is probably a little different than what you guys are used to. But I'm always more interested in kind of the discussion side of it. And I feel because the series is good, and I know Sheikh Hatem, personally, I have a good relationship with him, alhamdulillah. And I think the way he teaches fiqh and the way he approaches fiqh is something that is very healthy. And I think the way he explains is something that's really nice. What I'm going to try to do is do slide summaries and then have a discussion on those summaries, inshallah, every class. So I will assign, videos for you guys to watch every week, and then the appropriate sections to read along with those, inshallah, and then we'll discuss those as the weeks go by. But bi'idhnillah, I would think probably within 8 to 9 months or so we'll have covered all three of those sections, ibadat, muamalat, and jinayat.
Inshallah. Will we get ijaza?
Ijaza? Ajizuk, ya akhi. I'll give you ijaza right now.
All right. I have a few questions, Sheikh, if you have time.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Okay.
Anybody has any questions? It's not a problem.
Okay. So people always confuse the words and concepts fiqh and sharia, and often using it interchangeably. I know there is a difference, and briefly is so sharia is a divine law, and the fiqh is human attempt to interpret that law, the divine law.
Yes.
So my question is now, what are sources of the sharia? Are they the same as fiqh sources, or they're different? Meaning we have, according to Hanbali madhab, Quran, Sunnah, Ijma, Qiyas. Are these the same with Sharia or they're different?
No, the Sharia is just going to encompass the Quran and the Sunnah, right? Because those are the things that are divine, right? Ijma and Qiyas, even Ijma and Qiyas, is it possible that you would have scholarly consensus on something that goes against the Quran and the Sunnah?
Yeah, but it depends on how you no?
No, you don't. All ijma is going to basically the Quran and Sunnah is a large umbrella, and all of these other tools they fall under that. So even when we talk about like istihsan and istishab and maslahat al-mursala and fatwa sahabi, we'll talk about, okay, what roles do those actually play in regard to the Quran and Sunnah? Like, why do we have all of these tools? And basically those are just they're ways to focus the Quran and the Sunnah, if that makes sense. Because the thing with the Quran and the Sunnah, you'll find that there's sometimes very vague wording versus ijma. Ijma is going to be very specific, right? It's going to be very specific, very clear wording that the ruling on this is it's haram. But if you look at the text, you might look at the Quran, you might look at hadith, and you'll find that, okay, there's an indication for that, but it's not 100% clear. But you go to ijma and khalas, there's no doubt about it. So it's just a fine tuning. So ijma, qiyas, istihsan, amal ahl Medina, they're just ways to kind of fine tune the Quran and the Sunnah. But ultimately, the Quran and the Sunnah is the Sharia.
Okay, got it. I think a few other questions will be covered in the next lectures, inshallah. So I'll ask them later. I'll just give chance for my classmates to ask questions if they have.
Sure. Zakir or Sayyid, if you guys have any questions.
Assalamualaikum. I have a
Salam.
question.
Sure.
We talked a little bit earlier about, I guess, one of the goals of the madhahib is to create consistency in the law, right?
Yeah.
And what you pointed out was really interesting. I never really heard that. I didn't assume that it doesn't give us one answer, but rather it gives us a few answers. So my question is, when you look at I guess the geographical dispersion of a specific school, do we see that like is a fatwa coming from a Hanafi scholar in Afghanistan similar to the fatwa coming from a Hanafi scholar in Sham on the same issue? That's something that we see or not? No.
No, it's actually you don't see that.
Okay.
which is really interesting. So I had this discussion one time. I'm friends with a Darul Uloom graduate, and I was asking him about smoking. I think I was like, hey, what's good with the with the madhab? He was like, actually, there's a difference on how it's approached if you're from the subcontinent or if you're from Sham, like if you're from the Syrian region, both Hanafis. He's like the Syrian Hanafis, they have a different view, and he's like the subcontinent Hanafis, they have a different view. So I think that is definitely really interesting. Even the Malikis, like I think the Spanish Malikis, they didn't have like some of the rulings they had were very unique to what they had to claim and what they had to say versus those who were in like central North Africa.
Okay. And this is a bit of a reflection of Urf or like what?
Yeah.
what? Yeah.
No, absolutely. I have no doubt in my mind that the culture plays a huge role because that is what's going to dictate a lot of what the rulings are. Like for example, even wearing certain colors. Let me think of a good example. Like pink, like pink or purple, like these aren't colors that normally we would wear like in Western society, right? I think salmon is more acceptable now, but I'm saying just in general, like you wouldn't wear like a pink t-shirt or a purple t-shirt, right? These are in general, there's something that's not acceptable, but you'll find in a lot of like West African countries, completely acceptable for men, to wear those colors or to have like, bright fluorescent colors, things that we would find totally strange or something that are very feminine. So so culture definitely does play a role, in a lot of these things, even in defining masculinity, is something that it has a huge role in. Certain business transactions also, you'll have certain business transactions that are common in certain parts of the world that are less common in other parts of the world. And sometimes familiarity. So sometimes, you'll give fatwa on something and you're not familiar with it because it's not something that is done, where you are.
Jazakallah khair.
Ameen wa yak.
Zakir, do you have a question?
No, I appreciate you.
If well, okay, I have one more question, Sheikh. It has to do with, I believe it's called Qawaid al-Fiqhiyya, five legal maxims. Do
Yeah.
you want to answer now, or you want to cover it later? It's
Qawaid fiqhiyya is not. So the thing is, I'll touch on it, and I can mention a few of them, but it's not something that it's not the focus of this class.
okay. Gotcha. All right.
Is there something specific that you had?
It's just I understand the maximum. I don't quite understand. There should be no harm or reciprocation of harm.
Yeah.
No harm is more or less clear. Reciprocation of harm is a little ambiguous to me.
Basically, you shouldn't cause harm, and you shouldn't allow yourself to be harmed. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's very sensible, even meaning to put it in the first place, meaning.
Yeah, no, I completely get.
I thought maybe there's something more.
No.
Okay.
But the thing is, even that is, it's not absolutely right, because the thing is, everything we do, there's going to be a level of harm that's involved in it.
Well,
right? Anything we do. So it's not like, okay, don't cause harm. Absolutely no. It's basically, okay, try to minimize harm. Right, whatever situation you're in, try to make sure that you minimize that harm as much as possible within reasonable precautions.
And when you have two evils, go with the lesser evil.
Yes, that's definitely one of them.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I think I don't have any more questions. Do you know what we will be talking about the next week? What lecture? What topics?
So next week, inshallah, I want you guys to go through the first 3 videos. I think he spends too much time in the introduction.
Oh, okay.
But the thing, I want you guys to be familiar with all those things. All right. So basically, what he's going to talk about, he's going to introduce fiqh. It's a little different than my introduction, and there are some things I covered which he doesn't cover, which is the reason I have what I did with today. He's going to talk a little bit about Ibn Qudama and who he was, and he's going to talk about Al-Umdah. He's going to talk about the book itself, and I think all of those can be condensed within one lecture. I don't think they need 3 lectures to talk about that. And then in 2 weeks, inshallah, we'll be jumping into tahara and the types of water.
Okay, sounds good. Okay. Do you? I personally liked the remote way when we have presentation. It's my preference.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, if everybody is on the same page, I just wanted to let you know, unless you have something to do at the masjid, I'm fine remotely.
Okay.
Unless other guys say
no. So it's gonna be hybrid.
Okay.
So whoever wants to come in, inshallah, they're more than welcome to come in. Otherwise, that there will be a Zoom aspect. There will be a Zoom aspect to it. So anybody who wants to come in remotely, that's completely fine. I have no issue with that.
Awesome.
If we don't have any other questions, I guess we'll end, and I will see you guys next week. I'll keep posting updates in the group, inshallah.
I just have one question, Sheikh.
Yeah.
In the link you sent us, the column on the link, right?
Yeah.
There's three part 3. What do you call it? Links to download. Which one is the one that we should be using?
Use the first one.
The first one, okay. And
yeah,
I know the first 2 are both by Sheikh Khatim and Hajj. The commentary was that.
Yes.
What's the difference between the 2?
So the first one is
I see.
It's just going to be Tahara and Salah, and then part 2 is going to be Zakat, Sawm, and Hajj. I think the alternate translation, Wallahu Alam, is it might be the complete book. I'll have to take a look.
Okay, I appreciate it. Okay.
You repeat the time on which book to use or which link?
You can use the first one.
The first link.
Yeah. So the link I just sent, the latest one, there are 3 links in there. Basically, part 1 and part 2 are explanations of ibadat, but we're not going to do just ibadat. We're going to do muamalat, and we're going to do jinayat, inshallah. Okay.
Okay. I'm seeing the last thing you sent is from kalamullah.com. It's a very long link, that one?
Yes, that one. That one has 3 links for 3 different, they're not 3 different books, but they're just different translations.
Okay, and use the first one, you're saying?
Yes.
Oh, I see at the bottom. Okay, part 1?
Yes.
Tahara and Salah.
Perfect,
Okay.
Perfect. That's exactly it.
if someone likes reading hard books like me, I would recommend you getting this book. I'm trying to get Hatim al-Hajj sales increased. So this book is the newer edition, updated one. It's the same book, but more comprehensive according to Sheikh himself. It's the same book, but the more updated. I can send you the link on Amazon if someone interested. And the price is $70, I believe. Well, Sheikh Hatem deserves. So,
Yeah.
inshallah, you'll be rewarded as a fisabilillah. So,
Inshallah.
Inshallah. All right. Jazakumullah khair. If you guys have any follow-up questions or if you want to share any links or whatever, you're more than welcome to share them in the group. And hopefully for the rest of you, I will see you in an hour or so. Bismillah.
in an hour?
Yeah. Yeah, I have a tazkiyah class in an hour if you'd like to join.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't know that.
I'll send you the link, inshallah.
Okay, thank you.
يلا سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك واشهد ان لا اله الا انت واستغفرك واتوب اليك والسلام عليكم ورحمه الله وبركاته.
Walaikum
Wa
salam.
alaikum salam.